So I'm going to talk about talking with your doctor. And as someone who does research, for the first 15 years, everything was about how do you teach doctors to better communicate with patients. And then we sort of figured out that, there are two people who are talking. There's a doctor and a patient. And so the other thing that you could do is you could try to work on helping patients communicate better with their doctors. And in fact, there's been a number of studies, largely in the outpatient area, although we currently have a grant to do it. And what we're going to focus on today is try to help you better talk to your doctors. And so my goal is to try to describe to you what doctors are thinking. It's going to be really hard, but that's my job. To try to describe the diversity of patients that doctors see, because I think you sort of say, well, why can't my doctor know that I want X? And the reason is that your doctor's seeing 20 patients in a half day, and half of the patients want X and half of them want Y. And so doctors are sort of stuck between a rock and a hard place. I'm going to give you some evidence about ways that you can talk better to your doctors that, in fact, are sort of looked at in studies. And hopefully I'm going to answer some questions and worries you have about talking to your doctor. So my goal is, at the end, you're more comfortable in talking to your doctor. So we're going to start by saying, what problems or concerns do you have in talking to your doctor? And here's the deal, because I know you all love your doctor, but you've heard about other people who have problems with their doctor. So we're just going to say, for the purposes of this talk, that whenever you bring something up, it's really not about your doctor who you all love. It's about some other Yahoo who you heard about. Or was the doctor before you got the doctor that you now love. Okay? So what problems or worries or gripes? So sometimes they talk in a language that you don't understand. Okay? What else? They don't have as much time as you would like. Okay? What else? If you have multiple issues and your doctor only has so much time, how do you deal with that? Okay? What else? So how do you describe it in a way that he can hear it or she can hear it? Okay? Say, the only thing I want to talk to you today about is this, and it's really important. I'm not just raising this because it's the thing that before I leave, I want you and I to be. So just name it. So the question is, what do you do when your doctor reassures you and you're still worried, or you want at least for them to acknowledge that you're worried, even if they don't have an answer? Okay? These are great questions. So I'm going to talk to you about what doctors are like. They have those those personality tests that you had to take when you were. Doctors are introverted. Because to be a doctor means that you have to be able to spend a lot of time by yourself studying. Most doctors aren't party animals because you couldn't do well enough in school. So if you look at the sort of characterology of most doctors, they're introverts. They're about science and facts and reasons. So I joke that if you sort of looked at all communication as an emotional aspect, I'm worried, and a sort of cognitive aspect, don't worry, it's nothing. Doctors are like Popeye. They have really big cognitive muscles, and they don't have very big emotional muscles. For those, given that most of you are women, they're more like your husband than your best girlfriend. So when you ask doctors to deal with emotions, they often have trouble because they want to solve problems. That's why they went into medicine, to solve problems. And if all you really want for them is to acknowledge that you're having trouble, or to say, I can see you're worried, and you just want them to name it and know that what you're going through, sometimes you have to help them because that's not their normal way of being in the world. Their normal way in being in the world, if you say, I have this pain, they're either going to say, well, take this or do this, not say, I can see it really worries you. Because their brains are based on facts and problem solving. So they focus more on cognition than emotion. They solve problems more than they empathize. And they're sort of cheerleaders. They have to focus on the bright side. They're giving you all medicines that make you sick as stink. They couldn't do it if they didn't believe those medicines worked. And so if you look at doctor-patient communication, particularly oncologists and how they talk to you about stuff, they're going to always be on the positive side. Now, you may like that. You may say, I want my doctor to be a cheerleader. I want my doctor to always be on the positive side. On the other hand, there are some people who say, I want my doctors to be as straightforward as possible, and they have trouble with their doctors because they feel like their doctors are always telling them, don't worry, it's going to be okay, and their bodies are telling them it's not doing so good. And so they feel conflicted because they're not sure what to believe. So that's sort of how doctors are. The second problem doctors have is that they vary. Their patients they see vary. You may want to know about everything. And when you get home, you get on Google and you read every side effect that's ever been written about everything. Makes you crazy when the doctor tells you all that stuff. You just want to know the big picture. If the doctor's okay with it, you're okay with it. Some people want to know everything about their prognosis. Other people, not so much. And it may vary depending on how sick you are. So some of you may sort of say, gee, I want to know everything when I'm feeling good. And others of you say, I never want to know. Others of you don't want to know everything. Some of you want to be really involved in the decision making. And some of you don't want to be involved in the decision making. You want your doctor or your family to be making decisions. So think how hard it is for the doctor, because you don't wear that on your forehead. How are they supposed to know that you don't want to know very much when you came in and were bitching at him because he didn't give you enough information? And then, so he gives you the information, then he comes and starts seeing you, and he starts giving you the information, you start going like this. So and I only got a short period of time. And we all sort of have our ways of doing things. I mean, are any of you teachers? Yeah, so while we say you should change what you teach for your students, you had your set pat lectures. And you didn't individualize as much as maybe you could have for every student. So think about what it's like for a doctor who every other patient wants something different from him or her. Some of you want doctors to show uncertainty and sort of say, well, I can't be really positive. You want the doctor to sort of talk about the data. Others of you want the doctor to be all-knowing. Some of you want a doctor who will talk about spirituality and prayer. Others of you are a little freaked out if your doctor starts talking about that, either because it means you're really sicker than you thought you were, or you don't really have that strong in religious beliefs, and it's sort of like, what the heck is this doctor doing? Talking about their religion, they're proselytizing, and that's not what I want my doctor to do. Some of you want doctors who dress in ties and wear suit jackets and have a lot of gray hair and call you by your first name but want to be called doctor. That is, they have sort of this power differential. Others of you like doctors who wear sweaters and they want you to call them by their first name and you call them by their first name and you're not very formal. I just want to point out that you're asking your doctor to sort of figure out sort of what you want in busy practices that's really hard for them to do. Because remember, most of them are introverted. And if it was just up to them, they'd rather be alone with a book and science than sort of all this sort of fast interaction with people who have lots of both cognitive and emotional needs. And it gets even harder than that because some of you want inconsistent things. So there's data that looks at what patients want about their prognosis, and often they'll say they want their doctor to be brutally honest, and they want their doctor to sort of be positive. Well, as you may know, that's sometimes not so possible to do. Sometimes being brutally honest means that I give news that isn't so positive. And so it gets even harder for the doctor because they're not sure how to err. Then, how many of you see, when you're in the doctor's office, are you the only person in the office? There are like 150 people, right? And you want your doctor to give you as much time as possible, but how many of you like to wait for 2 hours? I'm just amazed that no one raised their hand. So you want to have as much time as you need, but the person before you, you want them to end on time. That is so kind of you. That sounds like our government. We want all the things we want, but we don't want to pay any taxes. Okay, I'll keep going. I'm not going to go there. But it just points out that doctors who are seeing patients every 15 or 20 minutes and fitting you in because you don't feel good today have real time pressures. And then they're trying to answer your questions, and it used to be that you guys didn't know that much, but now you're Googling everything, or your kids are Googling everything, and your kids are saying, what about drug compound Y? I heard they were doing a study on it in mice in Switzerland, and ask your doctor about whether you could get compound Y. And your doctor wants to say, you're not a mouse. Don't worry about compound Y. And yet you come with like 20 pages of internet stuff, and you have symptoms that you want to talk about, and you want your doctor to be on time. And I want to point out that you need to help your doctor by prioritizing. So you guys have lots of communication. You talk to your kids, you talk to your neighbors, you talk to your spouses. In your life, what makes communication better? Okay? What else? So one is listening well. What else do you want? So you want, if you're not sure, you want to say, can you just repeat it back to me because I want to make sure we're on the same page. That would be helpful because that makes you feel like you're heard. Okay, what else? You want eye contact, and I would argue at least part of the time. You probably aren't going to get, because they got those silly butt computers, they got to write stuff down. So you want some eye contact. For the stuff that's important, you want them paying attention. Okay? What else? So can I tell you something? What? 90% of the time, I don't need to touch you. If I do a good history, in fact, if you look at the data, 70 to 80% of diagnoses are made by history. Only about 10 or 15 are made by physical exam, and only about 10 or 15 are made by lab. It's almost all the history that you get. And in fact, I'll often pull out the stethoscope and do it because I figure I'm a doctor. You've watched too much television. You want me to do an exam. But I already know what it is before I do the exam. It's all in the history. It's, so for example, if you come in and you're losing weight and you're having lots of nausea and you're getting, you're finishing your chemotherapy, I'm scanning your belly regardless of what I feel on exam because I know that exam isn't going to show what I need. And so if I'm time crunched because I really want to attend to you, I may do a pretty cursory exam because it doesn't matter. The exam for someone with ovarian cancer, the exam isn't going to tell them what they need to know. So they're not dissing you. In fact, they're being efficient in spending more time talking to you and less time doing something that isn't going to change what they do anyway. And we should explain that. I get that. And that's why they do it, because it's all about the history. It's almost all about the history. So it worries you because healthcare is so disorganized that you're worried that they're looking at the latest thing that maybe they didn't get but somebody else got, and that doctors are talking to each other. Okay. So here's another hint. If you want doctors to talk to each other, you got to help them. Because it'd be great if the world was different and I could politically tell you how I think the world should be different, and yet that isn't the world we live in. So if you see a doctor someplace else, if I was you and I was going to come see the doctor here, I'd get a copy of the results and bring them with me. The other thing you can do is remind your doctor. You can say to your doctor, I had test results today, so do you need a minute to pull them up before we talk about my test results? That is, because if they have the test results in the chart in front of them, I know you wish that the only person on their mind was you. It would be like, I don't know if any of you have more than a couple of kids. You sometimes forget who's you're doing what with. I often call my kids by my dog's name. It doesn't mean I love them any less. It doesn't mean I love the dog more, but that's a different story. The point is that help him out. When he's looking, they're not doing it because they don't want to do the right thing for you. They thought that the nurse had got the latest test results and put them on the chart. Again, I wish that systems ran better, but given the systems run the way they do, say, I just had that CT scan this morning, so if you need a minute before we start, you can pull that up. And here's the things that have been shown in the literature to help. Come with a set of questions or issues you want to talk about. And make them up at home. But then you got to negotiate them before you start, and we're going to talk about that. Decisional tools. If they're talking to you and they're using lots of big words, you can say, can I get some reading on it, and I'm going to make a decision, and the next week I'll get back to you. And then I know that on the internet, many patient advocacy groups have decisional tools to help you think through whether to do X or Y. And finally, and this is going to make me wildly unpopular with doctors, if I was really sick, I'd bring a tape recorder and audio tape my meetings with the doctor so I could listen to it at home. Or take someone with me. Now, I realize that doctors get a little freaked out when you want to tape the recording. Although I will tell you that if you talk to any good malpractice lawyer, for the doctors, they all love it when doctors tape record their conversations, or there's a tape. Because 90% of the time, what the doctor said in the tape recording is just perfect. And so the tape recordings make the doctors look good way more than they make the doctors look bad. And doctors get wigged out because they think that may mean that you don't trust them. So it may, in fact, be safer just to bring someone with you who takes lots of notes. It's okay. Take lots of notes. Please don't tape record them, though, without telling them. Don't be like carrying around those little things in your purses. So here's the hints. The first visit with a new doctor, you want to spend the first 15 minutes negotiating your relationship. Because you don't have to like all your doctors. Doctors are like dates. Did you like everyone you dated? And if you don't like the doctor, it's okay. Don't go back. The doctor, I would be more than happy if some patients who I don't get along with so well, who don't get along with me so well, decided that we mutually should just find someone who they match better with. Because the bottom line is, doctors and patients match differently. I take care of HIV-positive patients who have pain problems. So I take care of a lot of patients with addiction issues. I love taking care of them. I find their way of being in the world just fascinating. I don't like to take care of little old, worried, well, rich people. I find them demanding and snotty and not interesting at all. My next door neighbor in the office where I work takes care of little old, rich old people and loves taking care of them and hates taking care of people who have addiction pain issues. The patients are the same. So sit down with your doctor and think about, what do you want from your doctor? Is what you really want from your doctor the Marcus Welby? Or do you really want House? One of the doctors I work with runs on time, every bloody visit, like clockwork. You never wait. On the other hand, he's more like Clint Eastwood than Oprah. You come in, he gets the data, he answers the questions, you move on. If you want Oprah, you hate him. If you want to run on time, you'd love him. So you need to think a little bit about, what do I want from a doctor? And you need to tell them. You need to say, I'm the kind of person who's a little OCD and I like all the data. I'm the kind of person that I really only want to hear the big picture. And if it's bad news, I'd rather you set up a special appointment with me and my husband, because I really don't like to hear it by myself. Help them out. Tell them what the kind of person you are and say to them, look, I want to be a good patient. What's your expectation? Because if you don't negotiate it up front, then you're likely just to be pissed off. So I would sort of say, and it may be too late because you guys all have doctors, but if you move or your doctor leaves or anything, spend some time choosing a doctor that fits your personality. The second thing is really think about your agenda. I'm coming in to see the doctor today. What's the one or two things? And you know, guys, you only get one or two things. What's the one or two things I really want to make sure that I accomplish today? What's the one or two questions that I accomplish today? Because remember, they may have one or two things that they need to accomplish too, and visits are only 15 minutes or 20 minutes. If you have 10 things, you need to call and say, I need a double visit, because it just doesn't work. I don't know if any of you have seen therapists, but therapists, you get an hour or 45 minutes. I don't care whether you have 12 hours of stuff to talk about. At the end of 45 minutes, you know what they say? I'm really sorry, our session's up. And when your doctor's looking at the clock, it's not that he or she's being rude. It's that he or she isn't as good in negotiating time up front. And my guess is that all of you would rather have 15 minutes where your doctor is really present and paying attention to you than 30 minutes when they're looking at their clock every 5 minutes. Because it feels to you like they're paying a lot better attention to you if they're really paying attention to you. So don't ask for 30 minutes. You can walk in and say, you know, I know you only have 15 minutes. The one thing I want to make sure that we talk about today is X. Is that okay? Negotiate it up front. Now you could say, well, the doctor ought to do that. And yeah, the doctor ought to do that. We're working on trying to get doctors to do that too. But you're the other person in the relationship. If you want to have that kind of interaction with your doctor, highlight it. Say, you know, this is the thing that's really important to me, so I know you got a lot to write. I really want you to pay attention to me. You do that to your spouse, right? He's watching the game. You really want to talk about something. First, you wait till the game's over. Yeah, that goes over really well, I bet. Second, you say, I really need you to attend to me now, right? This is really important. Part of what I'm asking you to do is do the same thing for your doctor. Tell them what you need. Be straightforward. Because they can't, I know we're very powerful, but they can't read your mind. Now, I want to point out that you might also talk about how much information you want about bad news. We talked about that. If you're someone whose spirituality is really important, just tell them that. Now, I also want to tell you that your doctor is going to seem surprised when you do this, because most patients don't do it. So they're going to look at you like, oh my God, why are you doing this? And you can say, look, I know that this is 15 minutes that you could use for something else, but it's really important to me to have a good relationship. Be clear about what you want to accomplish. So sometimes you have lots of symptoms and you just want to vent, right? You don't expect them to fix it. You're in the middle of chemotherapy, you feel cruddy, you don't expect them to make you feel cruddy, you don't really want to take another pill, you just want them to know that it's been tough as stink for you. Say, you know, doc, I just need to vent for a minute, okay? I don't need you, I don't want any pills, I'm not depressed, I just need you to hear how hard this is for me. Help them out. Because you know that they're going to try to fix it and they're going to give you a pill because they want to try to make it better. And you may not want them to try to make it better. You may just want them to know that you're going through a tough time. So when they say, oh, don't worry, it's going to be better, I say, I hope it's going to get better and I'm still worrier. I guess I just want you to realize that every time I have a new symptom, I'm worrying and that it's really hard for me. So be clearer that you don't want them to reassure you. You just want them to know that it's tough to go through life worrying about whether any new symptom means that things may come back or get worse. And then when they do a good job and they say, yeah, I can hear it's really hard, tell them, oh, it's so helpful that you said that. That is, you need to train your doctor, just like you train your spouse. If you have a dog, you train your dog. You all laugh, but it's true. When your dog does the right thing, you give him a treat. I'm not suggesting you, please. But I am saying, tell them that they did, thank you so much. I really appreciated you're just telling me that you understand how hard this is. That makes me feel so much better that you're really paying attention. Because they like every normal person, they like to hear that they're doing a good job. So part of what I'm suggesting is before the visit, you sit down and you say, okay, what do I really want them to know? And I know you're going to write a list of 12 things because you're the kind of person who writes the long list because you come to meetings like this, right? And I'm going to tell you, don't walk in there with 12 things. There is nothing a doctor likes less than someone who walks in with 12 things. Well, there's some things, but it's high on our list of things we don't like because I already realize that I'm going to be overwhelmed. So you can give me a list of 12 things and think, I only want to talk about the first one today. That's the one I really care the most about. If we have more time, it'd be great. But the first one is the one I really want to make sure that I accomplish. Okay, but see, because I can tell you what to do. What would happen if you say, I'm not sure, maybe I didn't ask the question right. What I was trying to ask was this. What I often find, because remember, I take care of people with serious progressive illness, that people ask about prognosis and the doctor will say, well, you never can tell. And you really want to have more of, I would tell to people, say, no, I know you can't tell. And I'm not going to hold you to it. And I know how hard this is to talk about. And yet I'm worried about this for this reason. And so it would be really helpful to have some rough guess. As I go back and try to explain what I want and why I want it. What do I do if they have lots of jargon? Why do doctors use lots of jargon? Do you think we just want to act mysterious? Why do we use lots of jargon? That's what we do all day. I mean, when I talk to the house staff, we use jargon. It's shorthand. We can say shorter breath. You don't say write shorter breath in the chart. You write SOB, and it doesn't mean... But you write SOB. Or we say dyspnea, because dyspnea is it just means shorter breath. So we have like this whole other language. So we sometimes forget. It would be like if you spent 6 months in Paris, and then you came back, you might start using French words. We just forget. And it's really hard for us. So you can do one of two things. You can say, I don't know what those words mean. Can you try again? That's all you have to do. No one's doing it because they're trying to confuse you. Their brains are on Dr. Talk autopilot. And so I would just keep saying, I'm not sure what that means. And just to make you feel better, I was just at a meeting with the technical support people from UPMC, and you think that doctors have jargon. I spent most of the meeting saying, can you tell me what that means? And what is... I still have no, and they don't use real language because they have a technical language that they use all the time to talk to each other. And so they have trouble remembering that they're talking to someone who's not of the technical tribe. So just say, I'm really sorry, I don't know what that means. Because they're not trying to confuse you. That's way better than walking out and not knowing what they're saying. Any other things that will be hard about being really clear with your doctor and only having one or two things? They usually just wouldn't come to me because my name is Bob. They don't have, it wouldn't be like, oh, you're a boy. Sure. I mean, they're clear. So there are differences in how men and women talk. Those differences mirror how male and female doctors talk. The differences are probably attenuated because training for doctors brings people sort of closer together. There's still differences, particularly for all of you who are talking about female issues. It may be that either you're embarrassed about talking about it with a man, You sort of worry about talking about it with a man. You don't feel like men really know what periods or pelvic pain is like because they don't have the organs. And so it's easier. Now, I would say I think that's all true. That just means that male doctors need to try to get more description. Because, you might find it easier to talk to someone who's the same religion as you or the same ethnicity of you. And yet, we expect that doctors of different ethnicities are sensitive enough that they can talk. And I don't think there's anything wrong with trying to choose a doctor who's going to fit you best. And so there is relatively data that most females want to see female gynecologists. If you look, there aren't many men going to OBGYN these days. That's a market issue. Most women would rather have their babies delivered by a woman. One of the big problems is there aren't very many African American doctors. And when there are African American doctors, they largely fill up with African American patients. It's the same issue. It's okay. You're just unlikely to find a perfect match who's just like you. So some of it is help them out because they can't guess. And some of it is if you see a doctor and you're not comfortable in asking them things, one of the questions you should say is, is this really the right doctor? Because if you don't like your doctor, you should get another doctor. If you don't like or trust your doctor, you should get another doctor. And it's okay. You didn't like every man you dated. You got to at least be willing to ask him stuff. If you're not willing to ask him, then how do they know what you really want? How do they know what you really understand? They don't read minds. And you got to be willing to negotiate and realize that, if they're 15 minutes late and they've had a really bad day, cut them some slack. Some days that you've had a really bad day and you want them to cut you some slack. That doesn't mean it's an equal relationship. It is clearly not. They have way more power than you do. They have, it does mean that one of the things that all of you sort of intimated is that you want them to treat you like a real person and listen to you, and that means treating them like a real person and listening to them. Other things about this that will be hard. So I would say two things. One is it's normal not to trust your body so much. Your body sort of has disappointed you. Before, when you had aches and pains, you just said, oh, it'll be okay. Now you're not so sure because your body's like not the safest place. It has like screwed around with you when you thought it was just aches and pains. And so part of it is trying to trust your body and trying to sort of trust that your doctor will be able to tell. And you may say, look, I really don't have anything I'm worried about today. I have 7 different symptoms that are different from last time. I'm not worried about any of them if you're not worried about any of them. So I just want to tell you them. If yours think they're okay, then we can just move on. We don't need to deal with any of them. That's being pretty explicit, as opposed to if someone says, well, I have 7 things I want to talk to you about today. I have 7 symptoms, in which case my response is, oh, man. Particularly when I really don't think any of them are anything, because it's just going to take forever. If you help me out by telling me that you don't think they're anything either, you just wanted to run them by because they give you peace of mind because you're not sure how to trust your body, that helps me because we can probably deal with them in 5 minutes. Now, I also want to say that many of you may bring your spouse with you, which may be a good thing and may not be a good thing. Because you bring your spouse doesn't mean you get double the amount of time. So you might want to negotiate with your spouse if they have stuff, so you don't have your 3 things you want to talk about and your spouse has his 3 things that he wants to talk about, and then you brought your daughter and she has, that doesn't work, guys. And it really is, you and your spouse may not agree on stuff. Most of your doctors are not family therapists. They're going to get wigged out if you start to argue with your spouse. It may just be the way that you guys normally talk, but doctors don't know that, and most doctors are pretty much conflict avoiders. That's that introvert thing. So just be aware that you're going to freak your doctor out if you guys start carping at each other in the appointment. and it may not be getting what you want out of the appointment. Now, it may be you may want a therapist, and your doctor could refer you to one. And that's good because it's a lot of stress to have a serious life-limiting illness. So I just want to, and just remember, bringing another person in, if they're a scribe, it's one thing. If they're an independent sort of inquisitor, you got to figure out who's going to do what. Because otherwise, the time is limited. And it may be that you say, look, doc, I know your time's limited. Can I come back in a week? Because we just have a lot more questions. And most doctors are okay with that because it's respectful of them. So there's some factual things that you might want to ask. You know, what's my illness called? Now, it may be called one thing by doctors and another thing by most people. And it may be there are, in fact, 3 or 4 names for it. So you might just ask, because sometimes when the oncologist is going to call it one thing and the surgeon is going to call it something else and the radiologist is going to call it something else, and you're going to be sure that you have 4 really horrible illnesses and you only have 1. You might want to know about prognosis. And there are lots of different ways to talk about it. Cure rates, disease-free survival, median, mean ranges. And again, some people want to know this, other people don't want to know this. So help your doctor out by trying to explain to them what's the information that you want and how is it most helpful to you. What's the treatment? Is it curative or is it palliative? Will it work? You know, have the other ones worked? What does the literature say about it working? And one of the questions is, how do they define working? So most of the research in cancer defines working as shrinking the cancer. It doesn't always define as living longer. And so you need to define what you care the most about. Do you care that your cancer is smaller? Do you care that there are studies that look at quality of life? Do you care that you live longer? Different people have different values, and that's okay. Some of you play the lottery, others of you don't. You need to be willing to begin to think about those things. Who gives the cancer? Where do I get it? How long do I get it? How is it delivered? Now, I have to say, all these details, I probably wouldn't ask the doctor these stuff. Because the doctors probably may not even know all those details. I'd ask the nurse that stuff. Because the nurse is way more likely to know a lot of those details. And the nurse is likely to have a little more time. Some of you want to know what next? What if it doesn't work? And I have to tell you, doctors hate that. Because the doctors say, let's cross that bridge when we get to it, right? That's probably at $1. And what they're really saying is, I only have enough time to deal with the here and now. Dealing with the future and all the possibilities of the future, there's so many different ways that this could go, it makes me crazy. Now, if it's really important to you, say, could I set up a next visit? Because I'm the kind of person who's going to worry about it, and I'm going to get on the internet, I'm going to read stuff, and I'm going to make myself crazy. So if we could have another visit where I just sort of get a bigger picture about what might be next, that'd be really helpful. So to ask that. Be clear that's why you want to know. Because I have to tell you, most doctors don't want to go there. I don't know, some of you are shaking your heads like, yeah, I asked that, and they probably said exactly that to me. Because so many things could happen, we worry that we're giving you more to worry about. Now, some of you may have lived your whole life that way. You always were an advanced planner. Like you were the person who took like an extra 3 sandwiches when you took the car trip to go to West Virginia because the car might break down. If the car broke down, you didn't want to starve to death. And so that's your way of living in the world. That's okay. You just need to make sure that the doctor gets it. As opposed to some of you, if you really heard all that stuff, your head would spin. You'd never sleep because you'd worry about it. It's okay to ask for second opinions. If the doctor is like really wigged out by your asking for a second opinion, I would sort of suggest, why do you want to, if the doctor is that jealous, it's probably not someone you want a relationship with. And there's a certain sense that each of you are going to have sort of goals. Each of you are going to have priorities. And I sort of want you to sort of think about, again, what kind of doctor do you want? Do you want a doctor who's going to give choices to you? Do you want a doctor who's going to make a recommendation? And what the analogy I'll use is, how many of you have an auto mechanic? No, right? Some people want their auto mechanic to tell them all the different options. Other people want their auto mechanic to say, I would do this. It's going to cost this much. Or the cars, you need a new car. For example, I don't want an auto mechanic who gives me options. I want an auto mechanic who'll say, don't. Or it's going to cost this much. I would do it if I were you. That's all. I don't want all the details. It would just make me freak out. And in the end, when they gave me all the details, I'd look at them and say, what would you do if it was your car? So I'm going to cut out all the fluff, and I just want them to tell me what they would do if it was their car. Some of my friends are like really into cars. They want to like see the muffler to make sure that it's really as worn as it. God, what do I care what the muffler looks like? If he says I need a new muffler, I think I need a new muffler. That means that I trust my auto mechanic. If I didn't trust my auto mechanic, I need a new auto mechanic. So think about what kind of doctor you want, because there are all sorts of different doctors. There are big sort of energetic cheerleader doctors, right? They're quiet, and you have to think about what you need. The same way as emotions. Some patients say, I don't want my doctor to be responsible for my emotions. If I'd want that, I'd go to a therapist, or I'd go to my minister. I want my doctor to just be about the facts. Okay. Other people say, I really want I want to be able to talk about my worries with my doctor. So I want my doctor to do this. So you need to, again, let them know when they do what you want them to do, and let them know what you want. There's a consistent theme in this talk, I hear. So worries or questions, because that's sort of the end of the set piece. It would be like if you guys read about aspirin on Google, no one would ever take an aspirin. And so when you go home and you read about every side effect that your medicine has, and then you want to know how common it is, I mean, you drive a bloody car. You don't like, it would be like Googling, 27 zillion ways to die in my car as I drive into Oakland. Okay. And there's a little bit, what I tell people is, if you're taking a new pill, I can tell you the most common things, but if anything feels funny or really bad after you take the new pill, it's the pill's fault. I don't care what the literature says about it. Start something new, and now you have a new symptom. Until proven otherwise, it's what we did. So and yet some people, it makes them feel better to read it. If it makes you feel better to read it, then read it. Let me tell you, any study that's been done in mice, don't talk to your doctor about. Don't talk to them about any new drug that cures cancer in mice. Unless any of you are thinking of becoming mice, talking to your doctor about that is the number of years that it takes to go from mice to humans is basically 10 years. So to talk to your doctor about it now is basically just not a good use of your time. Unless you're interested in mice cancer. So the WebMD is pretty good, as opposed to Google, which gets every lunatic known to man. I think that, and I'm going to say this, that that Magee, my guess is trying to put together informational materials. So say, can I talk to the nurse educator about some informational material? I think that's fabulous. That's great. My guess is that your organization has informational material that's been vetted. Nothing has been vetted on Google, except for how often people hit. I mean, there's amazing stuff. I mean, you might as well pull out the National Enquirer, because the range of stuff that's, and so again, the worry is that you have 15 minutes with your doctor. Is that what you want to spend your time on? Do you want to spend it on the article about 5 minutes on mice? It might be, if everything else is going well and you just want to talk about science. But be clear. And what some people do is they save the biggest thing to last. And we all do this, like we're talking to our spouse. We sort of build up to the thing that we really want to talk about. And so, because we have to get comfortable, right? We have to psych ourselves up to talk about the fact that if they leave their underwear on the floor, the next time we're going to burn all their underwear. And so first we talk about the dog, and then we talk about the kids, and then we sort of say, by the way. The problem is you can't do that with your doctor. Because by the time you build up, he or she's getting up and saying, okay, we'll see you back. And then you say, well, I really had one more thing. Doctors hate that. So in the waiting room, role play with the person who brought you to get yourself built up. Because I'm serious, you know, if you don't go in with what you want, you're not going to get what you need. And if you wait because you're building up, it's just they're going to be done, and you're going to want to talk about the blood you had in your stool, and they really want to talk about the blood you had in your stool, but they don't want to talk about it 20 minutes into the visit because you finally got the courage to bring it up then. And so I get that it's really hard, and use that person you brought with you. Or tell that person about the blood in your stool and say, if I don't bring it up in the first 3 minutes, can you say, hey, honey, remember you wanted to bring up that one thing that was really important? Because there's nothing doctors hate worse than they're getting up and you say, oh, by the way, that's like the kiss of death. Because I've finished. When I get up and say, we'll see you next time, I've finished the visit, basically. And so when you say, oh, by the way, it's like, oh. No, I've never met a doctor who's happy about that. Why don't they say, do you really care what they would do? Why are you asking what they do? What are you really asking? What you're really asking is, what should I do? Right? Because you don't know anything about them. They could have completely different values than you. It makes them really uncomfortable. So what you might do is say, given that I value this, this, and this, what do you think the option is that is going to best help me achieve my values? They'll be way more comfortable with that than what would you do if you're me, because they're not you. And again, what we would teach them to say is, well, tell me more about what's important to you, and then I'll tell you what can be done to achieve it. If they don't say that, say, I care most about these things, so what do you think is most likely to achieve it? Okay? Does that? Yeah. Okay. Because when you say, what would you do if you were me? You know, particularly if you're talking to a man, what are they like? That's like, I have no idea what I would do if I were you. And because I don't even have that equipment. Second, what I really hear you saying is, I want you to really think about this and be as careful with your decision to me as you would want someone to make for you. That's what I hear. That's what I hear patients really meaning when they say, "What would you do if you were me?" You want them to say, think about this for a long time, doctor. This is really bloody important to me. So you can say that, but give them a sense of what the goals are that they're making a recommendation about. Does that help? Okay. You know, people can be mad at me when things don't work out. You know, sort of like when I'm mad at the people at the airport when my plane gets canceled. I'm not really mad at them. I hardly know them. I'm mad because life sucks sometimes and it doesn't go the way I want it to. And so I think that most doctors sort of realize that when you're angry or pissy or sad, that you're not really angry or pissy at them, you're angry or pissy at the world. Because, you know, if the world was just and fair, none of you would be sitting here. There wouldn't be this organization. And it makes them sad too. And I guess that's the other thing. When you're not doing well, they feel responsible. Doctors feel bad. Because they've worked really hard to try to make you get better. They've given you drugs that have made you all really sick. And so they're unhappy too. And yet they have to sort of, they often don't feel like they can talk about that with you because they don't view it as their job. So I'm going to give you two things about them. One is everybody's nice. People are a lot nicer to their doctor than the front office staff. Because you guys are dependent on your doctors. So even if you're a little pissy at your doctor, when the doctor walks in, you'll say, oh, doctor. And so if I had $1 every time I walked on the floor and they said, patient's really pissed off at you. They were like, and I walk in and the patient's like, oh, hi, how are you? So, just remember, also remember that the front office staff typically make like very, very little money. In our society, it may be unfair because they deal with everybody, first push, And so I think that using those things, and when they do nice things, tell them they did nice things. Be as congratulatory and nice to them when they do things that you like. Because they have really hard jobs and get paid not very much. And it isn't like they have to have lots of training for dealing with sick people to be an office receptionist in a doctor's waiting room. It isn't like they have to go to school to learn all about GYN cancer. And maybe it would be good, and yet, given the financial constraints, most of them don't. And so I get you, it's hard. Because you often spend more time talking to them. So I want you to do all one thing before you leave. I want you to write down one thing that when you see your doctor the next time, you're going to try to do that you don't normally do. So one thing from this talk that you're going to try to do, and I don't want to see it, write it down somewhere, take it home, and then before you go see your doctor, pull that thing out and remind yourself. The one thing that you're going to try to do based on this talk that you don't normally do. Okay? Okay, thanks a lot.